watching us online. So I'm Sophie Lambin. I'm the founder and CEO of Kite Insight and of the Kite Climate School, and I will be your moderator for today. So welcome to all of us that are joining us. We are joined today by a very impressive panel to discuss how corporate sustainability commitments can improve access to renewable energy, biodiversity, protection, climate adaptation, and in particular in global south countries. Corporate sustainability is often spoken about in terms of responsibility. But are we speaking enough about how large companies can also show solidarity with the countries most impacted by climate change and nature loss, and also the least resourced to mitigate and adapt to the effects? The UN currently estimates that the climate adaptation financing gap in developing countries is around 194 to 360 billion a year. That's roughly equal to the total advertising spend in 2022 for the US alone. What's more, across all 17 SDGs, the UN anticipate that developing countries face up to 4 trillion finance gap. And right now, wealthy nations deliberate what to commit to the Loss and Damage Fund. We are off to a promising start with 300 to 400 million already committed. As much will be needed to cover the cost in developing countries from the effect of climate change we were too late to adapt for. In this room, I invite us to consider how the corporate sector can manifest that same solidarity. There are known ways to manifesting that solidarity with tangible outcomes, such as investing in renewable infrastructure development, resilient nature-based solutions, or supporting locally led adaptation initiatives. But before we explore the how or specific measures, it's worth reminding ourselves of the seminal progress in Europe this year and the catalyst for change that can be. Green taxonomies and mandatory disclosure are emerging in other regions, and just yesterday, 180 countries joined the EU pledge for triple renewable energy by 2030. As the existence of this talk demonstrates, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, of CSRD, could be the catalyst we need to direct, incentivize, and ultimately unleash the latent power of the private sector. We are reaching far beyond the concept of accountability here. This is not about box ticking. These regulations are creating new conditions, paradoxically, for thinking outside the box that previously confined us. It is changing how companies embed sustainable practice and how and who is involved in doing so. For the first time, CSRD had made it mandatory for companies to comprehensively disclose ESG information. It also provides a clear, consistent, and reliable way for that data to be made available. What's more, it requires companies to push themselves beyond reporting how they manage the risk of environmental, social, and governing factors on their own financial performance, what's known as outside in, but also how they impact environment and society they are part of, or inside out. And when fully considered, the science of tipping points, planetary boundaries, natural capital, and ecosystem services tells us that an inside-out point of view requires not only to contribute to ecosystem restoration and protection, but also embed SDGs in their strategies, and by extension, to see this moment of crisis as an opportunity to design new business models around urgent sustainability priorities. So how do companies improve their inside-out impact? How do they improve their impact on the natural world, as well as society's ability to respond to unavoidable change that's already been caused? This requires a transformation of business models that integrates positive impact at their core. It's no longer a question of what is most profitable way, full stop. It's what is the most profitable way to improve our impact on climate, biodiversity, and justice. But the CSRD alone is a reporting framework. It's not a business transformation. how we use it, how we integrate its implication throughout our organization, how we interpret its implication for solidarity and impact on adaptation and resilience where they are most needed. That is what can be transformational. And that is what I look forward to speaking to our panelists about today. And there really could be no better to discuss the how of this transformation than our speakers today. We are honored to be joined by a panel that I almost wonder if I need to introduce, but I shall try for you nonetheless. So in the middle, if I could welcome Claire Wezant, who is Executive Vice President of NG, in charge of the Corporate Secretariat Strategy, Research, Innovation and Communication. In her work for the French government, she headed the Office of the Minister of Finance and Public Accounts. Please join me in welcoming Claire. At the far left, only men on this panel, welcome. Pascal Chalvon de Marais, Chief Sustainability Officer at Solvay. In 2010, he was appointed President and CEO of Blue Star Silicones. Please join me in welcoming Pascal. Milena Messori is the Director of Corporate Finance and Global Activities at the European Investment Bank, where she has focused a career spanning more than 20 years. Please welcome me. Join me in welcoming Milena. Thank you. And of course, Runa Khan. Runa is the founder of Friendship, the international social purpose organization from Bangladesh, and our host today. She's also a member of the Club of Rome, board member of Global Dignity, and on the Advisory Council for British Asian Trust. Please join me in welcoming Runa. But first, before we hear from all these wonderful, diverse, and critical perspectives, it is my honor to welcome to the stage Her Royal Highness Princess Esmeralda of Belgium and Chair of the Friendship Belgium. She has long been actively engaged in the protection of environment as well as women's rights, and has been a global advocate for the rights of indigenous people over many, many years. Thank you, Princess Esmeralda, for joining us, and I would like to invite you to say a few words of introduction.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Some of you might wonder why you ask the climate activists, human rights activists, talk first at a panel about corporate sustainability. Well, I tend to differ because I think it's very important that we build bridges, as our panel is called. This is the 28th COP. I have been to many COPs, and I can only see that our leaders are very slow. There are some progress, but they are really minimal when you consider the window that we have. Scientists are telling that every day. The Secretary General of the United Nations is reminding us also all the time we have very little time left. So I believe that it is up to the businesses, the corporate world, the private sector, to put this urgency and this speed together with the citizens. I think it's only us in those two different departments, world, that can move finally the progress. And I want to remind everybody that citizens want that change. We see them in the assembly of citizens. We see them in the street with the young people protesting. They want to do something for a better planet, for a better world for people. And the leaders don't act on that. On the contrary, we have a lot of repression now against protest, which is very worrying. It's not only on climate, it's also for peace. There is that gap between what the citizens want and what the leaders are doing. So let's put that urgency in practice. And let's remember also that I always say it's about justice. Sophie said that in the preamble. We need that justice because the global south is suffering much more than we are. Because the renewable, which is going up, it's true, there is so much more subsidies now for the renewable, but it's mainly in the global north. When you see that Africa has about 1/10 of what we have in investment in Europe, it's not acceptable. Bangladesh also is moving in the right way, but they don't have enough resources for that. So this is justice. We always also talk about emission, and we say, okay, China is the biggest emitter. Yes, but not per capita. Europe is before, United States is before them, much more. So again, justice, not finger pointing to the developing world, which needs to develop, but which needs the resources, the solidarity. And I would say that friendship, obviously I'm biased because I'm part of this organization, but I think that's what we do. We do knowledge sharing internally, internationally. We do solidarity, a holistic program. It's about women's empowerment, it's about health, it's about climate adaptation, and all together. So I really hope that this conversation today is about this building bridges and trust, and that we don't see too much greenwashing, which unfortunately we see a lot these days, but we see real progress, real transformation, and diversity. So I'm very happy that we have such a gender, not balance, imbalance, but we need that after hundreds of years of the country. But we need also diversity in the forms of more youth inside companies, inside decisive tables, negotiation. We need people from the ground, from the field, with all their expertise. And I think this inclusivity inside corporation will be very, very profitable. So without further ado, I think we are going to watch a video of friendship.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Princess Menza. And I think having a bias for friendship is okay. Thank you for those inspiring words. Maybe we can show the film now, and then we'll go to you, Runa.
Bangladesh is the largest deltaic plain in the world. Here, the rhythm of life is dictated by the rise and fall of the rivers. In their wake, small islands known as chars appear and disappear. Erosion can eat away as much as a mile of riverbank in a year, forcing locals to move constantly. Entire communities survive in extreme conditions, with little access to clean water, healthcare, or sanitation. Since 2002, the NGO Friendship has striven to improve life for the inhabitants of the region by sustainably empowering individuals and their communities. With the unparalleled help of the NG Foundation, this starts with electricity. Thanks to the solar-powered light in her family hut, Bithi can now do her homework on an evening. She attends one of the digital secondary schools, where recorded lessons from Dhaka's top teachers are dispensed on television screens, powered by solar panels. The results are impressive. 98% of pupils achieved grade A and A minor in national exams, placing them well above the national average. Thanks to her continued education, Bithi and many of the other girls escaped the risk of child marriage. They are empowered to believe in themselves and the future. Now life can continue here even late at night. Before, only dangerous kerosene lamps illuminated Rashida's evening work. But now she can sew safely after sunset, improving her earnings and well-being. In this grocery store, both business and a sense of community abound as customers gather to watch the solar-powered television. Children study, families cook, and farmers take care of their animals, all in the glow of the solar lights. The Para-Solar Technician Training Scheme has created new jobs for these young men. They now know how to install and maintain the solar panels in the village and can help families save their solar systems in case of flooding. They now have financial and professional prospects. Soon, the construction of a microgrid solar village will begin on the island of Goinor Patol, the culmination of years of collaboration between the NG Foundation and Friendship. An ambitious project in line with Bangladesh national strategy that the villagers await impatiently, allowing for the powering of shops, schools and homes. Simple, yet infinitely transformative, the presence of solar power for many here in the Char region is simply magical. The initial preparations for the solar village are underway, and into a once dark corner of the country, there will soon be light.
In 2002, I used to sail on the rivers of Bangladesh and found that there were areas in the country which were totally untouched. Communities who had no access to any basic services. They needed access to healthcare, to education, to public services, everything that we today, in this world, we take for granted. And electricity was certainly much needed there, because electricity is not only light, it's safety, security, better health, and of course, income generation.
In a once dark corner of the country, there are now hope and opportunities. The construction of the solar village in the Char of Goinapatal is the result of 10 years of partnership between the NG Foundation and Friendship. This truly innovative way of providing electricity has also been endorsed by the Bangladesh government. The construction of the solar mini-grid has been a truly incredible journey for all involved. It was a technical achievement given the difficult environmental challenges of the Chars. The transportation of materials was an adventure in itself. More than 200 batteries and 200 panels have been installed thanks to the local Parasol technicians and the Friendship team's combined efforts and determination. For young men like Sabu Jamed, chosen from amongst the best technicians, it was a momentous occasion to give back to their community. Now, the once dark village is illuminated with light, from shops to homes to schools and of course the streets themselves. And with electricity, dreams come true for the 3,000 local inhabitants, be it feeling safer at night, being connected to the world thanks to cell phones, opening one's shop in the evening, or receiving a better education at school thanks to recorded lessons on television screens. NG Foundation provided support and expertise, as well as volunteers from Energy Assistance France, an internal NGO of the NG Group, in order to enable Friendship in its long-term vision. NG is one of the world's leading energy groups, and its foundation aims to help the poorest gain access to renewable energy.
Beyond the distribution of just solar home systems, today we have made a kind of a social revolution in the Chor areas. Thanks to the support and expertise of the NG Foundation, Friendship is now recognized as a leading organization bringing access to renewable energy to some of the poorest communities on this planet.
Thank you for that, Rina. Nothing better than a visualization of how it impacts people to get inspired. So over to you, maybe for a few words of context. Hold on, we can't hear you just yet.
Yeah.
Try again?
Yeah, now we can. Now we can. Yeah, I can hear myself. So what happens? Why do you need electricity when people are suffering? They don't have schools. They don't have even a means of livelihood. When do you have to put in electricity for it to synergize and have impact which is beyond even the dreams of those who are living in those areas? So just to give you a little context, the areas that we're talking about, since 20 years, 25 years, they have been the most vulnerable communities in the country. Bangladesh, 170 million people, over 42 million people in Bangladesh are in some ways or the other impacted by climate today and have had at least one migration. We started working on the rivers. The river Brahmaputra can hold the city of Paris, 14 knots. That's how it flows. Context was no development intervention was possible in these areas. Government schools could not be dependable, they were washed away. Healthcare, totally inaccessible. So how can a country which kind of their main resource is manpower, main resource is market, have any access to this, to these people who have no buying capacity and cannot go anywhere? So after providing the basic services of health, education, empowerment, linkages to the government, access to funds, the jump comes when you provide electricity, okay? And this is what we started with NG many years ago. We started off with solar home systems. That didn't, I didn't quite like it because solar home systems are great when you know that the disposable system of the batteries are great. When that is not great, we needed to make sure that the whole control mechanism was with us. Bangladesh is a country where we have very, very, like the government, our ministries, they all want 100% electricity because they understand that that is the development jump, for the development jump. You cannot take electricity, main grids to these areas. Impossible. You have a river flowing at 14 knots, I mean, with all silt. How do you even transport electricity to these millions? So we started making these solar villages. And everything can be dismantled, they can be moved. And the idea was that we had to make them in some ways linked to the government structure so that they could be part of the main grid at one point. Second, Bangladesh gives subsidies for 100 kilowatts or higher. And these people are using 1, 2, 3, 4 kilowatts, you know? Their own income is multiplied by thousands with electricity. But there is no subsidy from the government. It's like healthcare for the poor. It's like education for the poor. The French government can't afford it. You know, there is some kind of a grant system which needs to come in with the with the economic system. Today, friendship is we've got 3 villages, but we can scale this to thousands of villages. We do not need we do not need poles to be put across rivers for electricity of 1 hour. These electricity and electricity tools can be spread out across these 30, 40 million people. And we are also, you know, just one element for any development is not enough. So we started the first mobile ship hospitals for health. The whole healthcare system, we are working now bilaterally with the government and IDB Bank, Islamic Development Bank, so that we can hand it over to the government after certain years, the healthcare systems that we have founded, at least 5 hospital ships, schooling, empowerment. I really have to shout. Can you hear me?
I just want to tell them
Okay.
that we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. And so, you know, with that on top of, so, you know, in a context where you are dealing with ultra poor, we cannot do things very rapidly. Things need to be step by step. And after providing a platform for them and not quicksand, we need to ensure that financial returns, financial markets, all this can open up. And this is what we are doing. Like hundreds of these parasolar technicians, community medic aides, teachers, they are all microsocial entrepreneurs. They are earning money, being part of the government, now part of the mainstream system of economy. And, you know, the value chain which is needed, which we all talk about, the corporates are talking about this, the value chain today, actually the start of each value chain comes from that source which we cannot see and we cannot reach. this sari I'm wearing today, okay? So let's talk about this sari. This is made by those women. Handloom, hand power, cultural heritage of Bangladesh, this particular kind of a loom. We started doing the first cotton and silk versions of this. This is the first of its kind. The cotton comes from areas where we've put in solar pumps, and that solar pump is enabling communities to use land which is wasted for growing biocotton. And that biocotton then has a synergy and we export. So you see, the mechanism of actually starting off having a very clear vision has to be followed through over years. And this is where ad hoc projects, we need to be very, very careful. We need to be careful that just because something looks very sexy for next 2 years, and UNICEF buys that, and then they say, okay, we've sold 1 million, is not a viable way of ensuring that deep development for communities, which is going to be the market, your market, tomorrow. They are not buying that. UNICEF has bought it and given it to them. So we need to understand what is it that is actually creating the value. When you talk about CSRD, what is it that you are actually calculating? Are you sure that your calculation mechanism is not being of a person who just goes and sits under a tree and ticks the boxes and gives it to you? And you think, wow, we've made an impact. I think we need to really delve into what really is creating impact, because it's so easy to close your eyes today. So easy to close your eyes and say we are part of a fantastic mechanism and system. But actually, give it tomorrow. Old organizations, the organizations who have been there for 50 years, they are not going to get young people coming and joining them tomorrow. You are going to have everybody my age, over 60. We are old, all of us. You don't want 60-year-olds, you want 35 years old. How is your value chain looking? Is it an ad hoc value chain or is it a real value chain? And for this, we need to work really with a vision. We need to work deeply. We need to work in a way where real empowerment is happening, and you want to create a market, give them the tools to create that market. A person who is blind and cannot get an operation done, either in the US or in UK or in France, can't get it done in Bangladesh. And we need to understand it's a very, very holistic way of looking at development or for creation of markets. And I think that's the way friendship works, so that it's not only for today, but even we as one organization is not the goal or a purpose. It is these millions of people who need to stand on their feet for the tomorrow, out of which in Bangladesh we have 65% youth, all below 35 years old. Yeah. And they are the market. Help us create that market. That's important.
Thank you, Runa, for those words. I think a very good setup to the conversation we're going to have in a minute after Claire has spoken of a holistic, sustained model of support and empowerment. And your sari is beautiful, by the way. Claire, can I give you the floor?
Well, thank you very much. And first, we are in competition with the other room, so I hope
friendship will prevail.
Friendship will prevail. We are confident on this panel that we will make it. But we are slightly at a disadvantage as women, by the way. So let's make sure we make it. No, difficult to talk after Runa, obviously, and Princess Esmeralda, who have been very inspiring. And thank you, Runa, again, and of course all the supporters of friendship and for your action. I will start just by saying that at NG, and I didn't expect this video, by the way, but at NG we are very, very proud to have been by your side for more than 10 years now. And I think that goes exactly to what you're saying. We need long-term actions, and it's through long-term actions that you've been able, with friendship and with all the people who have supported you, to build what we've seen in the video, which is incredible. I mean, the fact that you've been able to create communities whose lives have been totally changed, thanks in particular to electricity, to empowerment of the people, to education for little boys and little girls, is absolutely amazing, and is key and at the core of who we are as a corporate. At ENGIE, we have a foundation, of course, and I'm very pleased to be vice president of the foundation. We're also a large international energy group, and we are at the core of our purpose. And we have a purpose, by the way, raison d'être, a purpose which is in our bylaws. And at the core of our purpose, we have the acceleration of energy transition and the idea to reconcile economic performance with positive impact on the planet and the people. So you see that what we've seen in terms of action of Friendship is really totally consistent with what we want to do. And we are supporting, by the way, Friendship, which is operating in a country where we're not even present as a corporate. We're not in Bangladesh. But because we felt the action was so compelling, we are very happy to be on the side of Friendship. Now, let me talk a bit more broadly, because I think this action, of course, this help is a part of our action. But more broadly, I think I want to rebound on what Princess Esmeralda was saying. I really believe that the clock is ticking, and that indeed we have absolutely no time to waste in the fight against climate change. So adaptation is key, but we still need to work about mitigation as much as we can. And so that's what, and by the way, that's true for all inhabitants on the planet. I think by now it's probably clear to everybody that there is a global north, global south. The reality is that everybody will be affected by climate change. So we need, the clock is ticking, we need to act quickly. The situations are of course very different across countries. So, I mean, you were alluding to it, Runa. There are different starting points, different development needs, of course, that need to be taken into account. At the same time, we know that the recipes to achieve energy transition and to fight against climate change are quite common. It's common realities at the end of the day. Common realities being we need energy efficiency. And so we need to make sure that our processes, our ways of producing, consuming is energy efficient, and we need green energy. And this is true for any country on the planet. So in this respect, I mean, that's really what we have at ENGIE at the core of our action. I mean, we are present in 30 countries, including emerging economies, notably South America, where we have a very strong presence in Brazil, but we're also very strong, for instance, well, we're also building renewables, for instance, in countries like India. We are present also in some countries of Africa, South Africa, Morocco, Egypt. So we are, and what we're doing is exactly empowering countries to achieve energy transition. So we're building renewable. The video was a small-scale renewable. We're building, obviously, at much larger scale, solar energy. We're building wind energy as well. And we're also very much believing in renewable gases. And by the way, renewable gases will also be important for the Global South as a way, at some point, for the countries which are rich in natural resources, to be able to export some of their resources when their needs are fulfilled. So we really very much believe that by accelerating energy transition in the countries, we make both the world better and we have a profitable business. And that's what you were saying. I mean, there are no trade-offs. I mean, we are convinced that acceleration in renewables, acceleration in decarbonation is good for the planet and is also a good business. So that's also something I wanted to share. I don't know how much we'll be talking about Friendship, about energy transition in general, but I think what we see in this movie, the way, I mean, yes, we have to reconcile energy transition with people development, and we see that it works. We are convinced that this is true on a broader scale. It's not a trade-off. Achieving energy transition is the way to have a sustainable business model, and that's the core of our actions. Just finishing by this, we put more than 75% of our growth investment into renewables and into decarbonation solution. So that's key for us, and we are committed. You mentioned the pledge on renewables. We are committed. We're part of this pledge to triple renewables by 2030.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. I think this concept of profitable projects that can really serve people and planet is very well made. So in my introduction, I was talking about CSRD having the potential of not being a box-ticking exercise, but really an opportunity to shift business model. And Pascal, I'm looking at you because I'm probably going to go to you first. I'm interested to hear, how did your company take into account CSRD when it entered in force in January, and how are you using that framework as a driver of transformation?
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you for inviting me in this fantastic ladies panel. I try to elevate myself because it's So you see, before getting to the CSRD, because I don't want to be too technical, CSRD is a very complex matter. I really acknowledge the fact that this panel is extremely relevant because when we look at the carbon emission today of the global south, it's the same as the one of the combination of the 40 OECD countries which have committed to carbon neutrality. It's the same. It's about 1/3, and 75% of the population, according to, let's say, official data, will be part of this global south by 2050, consuming 60% of the primary energy. So if we do not tackle that question, we miss a big part of the equation, right? And I don't think we are talking enough about that. We're talking about net zero pledge on developed country. I mean, that's on way. But what about this big chunk? So this is absolutely relevant. Coming to the Solvay approach, you know that we have developed a plan 4 years ago under the leadership of Dr. Ilham Kadri, which is holistic. And my point is, we do not make difference within a group which has about 100 industrial locations in the world. We do not make any difference in terms of standards between a site which is in a developed country or a site which is in a developing country. We apply the same standard, which means carbon neutrality for all, which means tackling biodiversity, creating roadmaps in each of the sites, and which means working on the question of equity, inclusion, diversity everywhere. So we do not make that difference. Now, when it comes to implementation, this is where there are a lot of difference. And CSRD, to come to your question, is giving us a frame in order to just to explain what we are doing and to raise the bar, to raise the bar. Because in the CSRD, if we fall in the trap of administrative check the box, we will swim in an ocean of data reporting, which may be really useless, right? Because we have more than 1,000 data points. So who will read that? So the very beginning of the rationale has been, let's come back, and you mentioned that very clearly at the beginning. Let's come back to the strategic intention behind what we have to do. And here we have a frame, because the strategic intention by topic makes sense. So we have in the CSRD 10, let's say, topics: climate, nature as 4, and the social part, the social piece, has also 3. And within this frame, when we pick up maybe 3 of them, the climate transition one, the biodiversity standards and the community standard, we are tackling at least three, among the other ones, three key topics for which we need to think in terms of strategic intention where we want to go. So I could elaborate on some examples, but we go beyond philanthropy. Indeed, corporate citizenship philanthropy, we have a fund, Solvay Solidarity Fund, created during COVID, extending its activity, and it works, let's say. We are there when there is a crisis. But this CSRD goes beyond that. I mean, it is not about philanthropy. This is about creating activity and an inclusive activity. What the corporate business can do is certainly not provide the trillions that bridge the gap, at least individual company. But what we can do is to bring activity, to bring jobs, bring technologies, and by thinking how we can be inclusive in each of our sites, questioning what is the ecosystem, what is the nature system around, what are the needs. We can express the solidarity component in what matters. And it doesn't matter the same way everywhere. Some areas is in a dry zone. We need to solve the question of water. Another one will be really about very poor economic conditions. We need to provide jobs. A third one will be really about the question of the energy, and so we need to provide energy transition. That's a combination, actually. So it's not a global thing. It needs to come to local. Yeah. I stop there, but we can elaborate more on that.
Thank you. Maybe, Claire, you want to build on that from a corporate point of view, then I'll go to you, Milena.
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, because I already talked a lot. So we are all facing the CSRD adventure, indeed. As Pascal was mentioning, I think the important point is that, and that's true for Solvay, I believe, as much as for Engie, we didn't wait for CSRD to act. So the most important thing is that, yes, CSRD will be put in place, but we have acted for years for climate change. We have acted for years to build a just transition. We have taken nature and diversity commitments. That's well before CSRD. Doesn't mean that CSRD is not a step forward, but I fully concur with what Pascal was saying. Let's make sure that we keep it manageable. We are an engineer company, so we take reporting very seriously.
You like data?
Yeah, we like data. We have carbon neutrality commitments, 2045, all scopes. We have a well below 2 degrees trajectory. We follow it very closely, and I really believe that, and we drive it through the organization. Let's make sure we are able to have reporting that's meaningful, that can indeed correspond to action on the ground, as opposed to an overwhelming mass of 1,000 data points, which would risk being less productive.
Yeah, and it's really talking about CSRD as an accelerator of transformative practices and creating that level playing field that is not just the leaders that are showing the way, but it's bringing many more companies in the value chain along.
I think what's important is measurement. We are all in favor of measuring.
Right.
Measuring is key. Having objective data is absolutely key. But let's make sure this remains manageable, and let's make sure that as companies are putting it into action, it doesn't distract them from exactly what you were saying. There are key focus areas. We need to advance on them and not go into an overburdensome exercise.
Understood. Milena, from your vantage point, what would you say you have observed in terms of transformative practice since CSRD has been?
Yes, thank you, Sophie, and thank you for having me on this panel. Let me start by saying that at the European Investment Bank, we went through a transformation a couple of years ago. So already in 2019, we rebranded ourselves as the EU Climate Bank, because we understood how important it was to be very much present in this space and give ourselves very ambitious targets. The targets have been met. in terms of ensuring that all our projects across the board, so not just within the EU, but especially also in the Global South, because we are present in the Global South, 10% of our annual activities are investment in countries outside the EU, we apply the same standards. So this means making sure that the project we finance are fully Paris aligned, and that half of what we finance is contributing to climate action and environmental sustainability. And finally, the last target we have is that by 2030, we want to see 1 trillion of investments generated by our intervention on the ground. So very high ambitious target, but that means we need to be sure that we cooperate with counterparts that are equipping themselves with ensuring that they have a path, what we call a path towards decarbonizing their businesses. And we do that together with the large corporates within the EU and outside the EU. We accompany them in this process. We provide the technical assistance. And with smaller counterparts, because we are addressing also the needs of the smaller counterparts on the ground, we are doing that via our intermediaries. We have put in place greening the financial system intervention so that we can work with central banks and local banks to ensure that they continue to bring forward the standards we want to see implemented. Now, having said this, I totally understand the issue of making sure that what we're asking in terms of measurement doesn't go out of proportion. We want to collect data, we want to make sure that we are not greenwashing, we want to make sure that all of this is really manageable. And that's why we are in a constant dialogue with the European Commission in ensuring that the taxonomy is indeed implementable, that it does not become a big objective on its own without really having a meaningful implementation. With this in mind, we are therefore, while we, and thank you for this, I think I totally agree with your approach. While we ask for standards, at the same time we're very conscious that the implementation might not follow 100% these standards. So there has to be some flexibility when it comes to the Global South. And I give you an example. We are putting in place a major initiative to support the issuance of green bonds in developing countries. Green bonds will certainly not be EU taxonomy conform from day one. But we will strive to that. We will want to get there. And this is our role as an MTB. We want to make sure that we set the standard high. We are flexible when it comes to implementation, but we want to bring our counterparts to achieve those standards.
Thank you. I just wanted to maybe pick up on your point, Claire, about let's make sure it doesn't become just a burden of reporting. And Pascal, as well, do you have ideas of what needs to happen within companies for the value of this process to be more closely linked to the kind of issues we were talking about, to the kind of outcomes, such as solidarity? Are there ways of bringing people inside a company more, to bring that process more embedded inside a company, not leaving it to the reporting department, to really make that connection between CSRD, the data, and what it can do to the impact that companies have? Pascal, you're nodding.
That's a central question. Thank you, Sophie, for that. What the CSRD brings compared to for other standards, like what is being developed in the ISSB, for example, is that the ISSB is focused on shareholders. It's written on investment for shareholders. What the CSRD brings in the spirit is addressing stakeholders. And that's the big difference, right? Which means that the report will not be made only for the shareholders, but for all the other stakeholders. And it creates a lot of difference. And through that angle, indeed, we need to think the strategic intention as I was mentioning before, to analyze what are the local needs and what is the intention of the company. Not only in solidarity, because solidarity is a consequence of being present as an activity. We are not philanthropic, right? We need to create business, but it's a good way to do business, which means bringing together with the activity, job, economical developments, and taking care of the nature environment. So it's really an holistic approach, but delocalized by side. This is what the CSRD is bringing in terms of frame, and it's a reporting, let's say, directive. So it means becoming more transparent. Someone talked about greenwashing risks, and I agree with that. I mean, we need to be very careful with the temptation of greenwashing, and go to the data, go to the truth, in order to accept that we're not perfect everywhere, but to show the momentum, to explain our strategy and see where we want to go.
Claire, I see you nodding. Does it call for a different kind of engagement of your stakeholders?
So first, I think, like Pascal, that having a common measurement framework is, of course, welcome, and will provide a level playing field. And yes, like Pascal as well, I think what is important is what will be the reality on the grounds of our action. And at the end of the day, one big difference with energy transition is that we are moving to projects which are far more grounded in local realities, I would say, and far more beneficial in terms also of local employment, local development, than energy projects that traditional ones we could think about. So that's really something that's, I would say, embedded in a way in energy transition. That's a big advantage of it. And yes, CSRD with its different components. There is, of course, the climate component. There is the nature biodiversity component. There are the social aspects components. With these different components, they are a good way to provide a framework that, in a way, summarizes what's important in our action on the ground. It's about economic performance, of course, but it's also about the impact on the people in the communities and on the environment more broadly.
Milena?
And Sophie, just to build on what Claire was saying, ultimately what is important...
Sorry, Milena, can I ask that we put Milena's mic up a little bit?
What is important is to, and we said that before, is to attract finance, especially private sector finance, to projects and enterprises, companies in the Global South. And this CSRD is giving a framework that ultimately will provide a tool for risk assessment, which will almost be similar to what we have when we ask companies to provide their financial statements. It's something that is easily to compare, it gives transparency, and the aim in the end is to attract investors. And this is, I think, a very valid tool to use in that respect.
And reinforce the business case. So if we go to the potential of innovation that sustainability presents, I'd like to ask you, what specifically are you doing to ensure that the innovation that sustainability instigates really contributes to a fair and just livable planet or distribution of resources? Maybe if you can bring some of the practical ways in which you bring that thinking into how those innovations are deployed. I don't know who wants to go first.
I can give it a try. So yes, well, just transition is of course key, and by the way, that's true in all countries. It's not only true for emerging countries. I mean, one of the big challenges we have right now is to be able to go forward in energy transition in an environment where there are some pushbacks. I mean, here at the COP, everybody seems to agree and to be committed. The reality is that when we open the windows, there are some pushbacks against energy transition in a number of countries, be they developed countries or emerging countries. And what is key is for energy transition to be fully owned by the people. And by the way, it should be, because we know that if we don't embark on energy transition, if we move to inaction, there will be tens of millions of people who will go back to poverty by 2030. I think the figures I have in mind is that inaction would bring something like between 70 million people and 135 million people into poverty by 2030. So inaction is not an option. At the same time, we have to be conscious that there is some pushback against energy transition, which means that we must be even more careful to make it not only accepted, but owned and affordable. It's energy transition for the people. And we really have to achieve it. The way we think about it is, of course, multifaceted in a group like mine. Well, it starts with local communities. I mean, how are the projects not only compatible, but owned by the local communities? And we have developed a label on this with Bureau Veritas called SET, which is a label through which we make sure that we have a positive impact on nature, on climate, and on the people in the communities. So that's really at the core of the way we develop our projects. So make sure it works and it's positive for the local community is one. Make sure, of course, that whenever there are some social consequences of some of our actions, we deal with them. And we had to, we had some units which were working on coal, which we had to close. So when we transition out of the system, we have to take into account the local consequences, and that's what we do in our daily project. We of course take care of our employees meanwhile, but not just our employees, also the stakeholders around. For instance, the people working in coal extracting activities. What is the change in system going to mean for them? And then of course, we are careful about our value chain. The value chain was mentioned. It branches, of course, worldwide. So we have to make sure, and we ask our suppliers to respect a number of commitments to make sure that their behaviors is compatible with this just transition. So it's multifaceted, but I believe that it's absolutely key, this notion of justice, fairness at the core of energy transition if we want to achieve it.
Interesting. So you truly operationalize just transition in your process. Pascal, do you want to pick up on that?
Yes, sure. On the same direction, and we have similar kind of actions. What I can mention maybe 2 or 3 pragmatic actions that we have taken. The first one is we have recently committed for the living wage, to secure the living wage. It was during the climate week, so it's not so long ago, right? Realizing that securing the minimum wage for our own employees first, checking that, because when you are in a developed country, it's easy, but when you go everywhere in the world, you still need to check and learn that. But the idea is to go beyond our own employees indeed, and to embark our suppliers. We have 40,000 suppliers in a company like Solvay, so how do we address the fact that tier 1, 2, 3 of this supplier in the value chain also have this respect of a living wage, the minimum. So it by step, because we need to learn. Behind the principle, the devil is in the details. How do you define that? What's depending on the country, the welfare system, it's not the same. So that's I would say the number one. The second two is to address another type of justice, which is in the pay gap. In terms of gender equality, pay gap. Do we have the salary for the women at the level of the men? Is it true everywhere in the world? The answer is no. Even within a company like Solvay, we have identified about 1,000 cases of gaps, which were a bit surprising, abnormal, I would say. And so we are correcting that. So this is also the courage to put that on the table, explain that we are not perfect, and then put the system in place in order to correct it, right? Not yet with our suppliers, but it should be another step, right? And then maybe the third one is we are indeed working in some developing countries. We have a specific case which is rather well known, maybe in Belgium, but working in Rajasthan for some biosourcing of guar activity, where the key point is to bring, let's say, know-how, but more than that, to source by bringing back the dignity to this population, and especially the women, which are a very key role to play in these countries, giving them the power, the money, the power to act and to represent their activity, create an income, and then be proud of that, educate their children, and improve their health conditions. So that's a patchwork, let's say, of different initiatives, which at the end of the day go into that strategy, which is that a company like Solvay has a certain responsibility, an accountability not only for own, let's say, employees, but within the communities around.
Thank you, Pascal. Milena, do you want to go to this point?
For the EIB, just transition and just resilience are a very important policy. We are actually launching this new policy here at the COP28. That means that for the European Investment Bank, any transition has to be just, meaning that it doesn't have to leave anyone behind, and also has to be in terms of resilience, which means we need to make sure that those vulnerable population, vulnerable countries that are most hit by the climate change are protected. So with that in mind, this is very important. We have set for ourselves very important targets for adaptation. Adaptation is not an easy subject. It's very difficult to find opportunities for investment in adaptation that are also attracting private sector investment, because as an MDB, we cannot cover the full cost of adaptation investments. We need to have somebody else on board. The way we go about it is by de-risking other investors, because we really believe that this is the way to go, especially when it comes to rural communities, when it comes to women in rural communities. They need to equip themselves with the tools to make sure that they can sustain and be resilient to climate change.
Thank you. I'm maybe going to try to say, no, maybe not. So I think what this leads into is to the final question for this panel, which is really, how can the corporate increase the support? Clearly, there's more support needed. Runa, I'm sure you'll agree. And, de-risking, obviously, what you just talked about, Milena, is really important. But I would like to ask the panelists, what more do you think you can do? What more do you need in order to be able to support the Global South to avoid future losses and damages? Recently, I have witnessed how some companies are starting to think about creating funds, for example, emergency response funds to climate extreme weather events or climate disasters. What do you see coming on the horizon? And what more do you think the corporate sector can do or needs to be able to do more?
Do you want me to start?
I was going to...
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose you validate my question, Runa, that there's need for more?
Okay. I'll try to really speak loudly.
Please, go for it.
And I hope I've heard your question right.
I was asking what more can be done.
I just want to try to put a few things together. So actually, the countries which are today in a position of what you say, the north or developed countries, the development or the usage of that development and all this, the fossil fuel usage is not only being done now, but it has been done 30, 40, 50 years ago. That was the development period that the northern countries have. Right, just energy transition, just to bring a few things in mind. Today, you can invest anything you want in any of the southern countries or global south, but I tell you, if we get oil, we are going to use that oil. All right? So that is reality. Now, so these are realities which we have to take into mind. However, I come back again to something which you said, Pascal, about philanthropy. Do not look at philanthropy with condescension, because philanthropy is the start of your end goal. You start with philanthropy, you build something, it's a part of a stakeholder that you're giving your philanthropy to. That philanthropy, today or tomorrow, will be made into grants. That grant, tomorrow, within that stakeholder, will be loans. And then it will become bilateral loan. The people are the same that you are pulling up. So philanthropy is just a start. And I think this is a mindset which I think the companies and must have in their head. They're not an isolated pocket. They're going to be part of your ecosystem sooner or later. And you have to try to pull them to be part of your ecosystem. Now, we have, let's say, I just wrote to our energy minister who was supposed to, he said if he had time, he would come. He's just come in this morning. He couldn't come. So I said, I am making promises on your behalf. He said, okay, go ahead. So I said, I'm making promises. So I asked, because I told him already that suppose, okay, we have this one village. You've seen the communities, if you see it from broad, these are little islands, and we need to give them energy. I tell you, 100, 200, 300% income goes up within 2-3 years when you give them electricity. All right, how do you give electricity here? We've only done 3 villages, one with NG, one with Summit. You will know Summit holds 18% of the energy private sector in Bangladesh. One with Summit and one with Standard Chartered Bank. 3 different players, 3 different kinds of players, so that we can scale this to 10,000 minimum of villages. 10,000 minimum means we will provide about 5 megawatts, right? 5 megawatts of electricity, 500 megawatts of electricity to the main grid. They are willing to do that. The government is willing to put that as part of the main grid. 10,000 of these electricity. So what are you doing with this invest? And it's going to cost about 400 million. What are you going to do with this? These people goes up in the economic bracket. You put that electricity into the main grid. Only when you're putting it into the main grid, because the subsidy of electricity in Bangladesh is 100 kilowatt plus. Below that, no subsidy. If you link up small places and you put these small 50 kilowatt together, you get 500 megawatts, and then the government gives you a subsidy. Now, this is the goal and the way you work. This needs to go up in the parliament. I've also tried to push that so that it goes up into the parliament after the elections. Now, so this is why I'm saying that it's not, philanthropy is not just kindness.
Yes.
One needs to look at philanthropy in a far bigger light than just kindness. Kindness is the first spark, but in the end, they're all part of your system. So, EIB, invest this 400 million and we'll link you up. Tomorrow, you're linked up with the government and this becomes a bilateral loan later. Yes. So, I think we need to work with companies in a realistic way. There are no poor countries and rich countries. There are poor people and rich people everywhere. And we need to cross these boundaries, understand these boundaries, and then start thinking of working in a slightly different modality than what we are doing today.
Yes. I don't think we needed your minister today, Runa. Can I ask other guests to react maybe on their views on what more can the corporate sector do to support the Global South?
Well, first,
Yes, we can hear you.
okay, yes. First, Runa, this was very impressive, and if I were the Ministry of Energy in Bangladesh, I would worry. He'd better arrive. No, joke aside. No, I believe indeed that there is no such thing as separate philanthropy from, I would say, the regular actions of companies. In our case, as I told you, economic performance together with positive impact on planet and profit is both at the core of what we do as a business, and that's how we develop the company, we grow the business, and that's, of course, key for all its stakeholders, including our customers, who depend on us. And at the same time, the two same principles, of course, not economic performance, but people and planet, are at the core of what the NG Foundation does. So it's not two different words, and I believe very much in alignment. We were talking about embarking the people. How best can we embark the people and young generation and not so young generation alike? I believe this is key for all of us. How best can we embark the people as when we are fully aligned and have a clear focus on what we do as a company? So I think this alignment is key, and by the way, it's working. It's working to grow the company. The company is growing. It's working also to attract talents. When the company embarked on energy transition, the number of applications was multiplied by 3. So it does work, and why? Because we all like to know what we're working for. We all like to do why we wake up in the morning, and feeling that we do it for, I would say, a big common challenge, which is achieving energy transition, be it through the foundation, be it through our regular business, is absolutely key. So what we can do as a group is do it even more, even better, even higher, and in particular, do everything we can to further accelerate energy transition.
Thank you, Claire. I'm just going to open up for anyone who wants to ask a question. If you have any, think about yours. Pascal, Milena, do you want to react to what Runa and Claire now said?
Yes, quickly. Yeah, but maybe what can we do more? I believe that each company has to bring the competency it has, right? So the energy company has to bring efficient energy transition. A company like Solvay, which is more in chemicals and materials, has to think in terms of maybe of circular economy, which is more the focus. And here I see in the global south countries globally a huge opportunity, because we are all, I mean, most of the companies are trying to shift to bio-based sourcing or nature-based solutions. And here there is local economy to be developed. If this is done with that spirit of investing, maybe philanthropy, or investing anyway, want to get 100 or 1,000, but at small scale at the beginning, and then spread, it could work. It depends on the local capabilities, right? I see we are already shifting some materials which were, let's say, fossil-based into rice husk, for example, based material, transforming waste into materials. This kind of evolutions is creating an activity, creating jobs, creating, let's say, revenues, and this could be transformative for the local communities too. So we can do more. For sure, we are not running at the right speed, but that I'm convinced, absolutely.
Well, final word on my side. I think I'm a firm believer of a partnership. So I think everyone can really bring to the table what we can do best. And indeed, we are part of a value chain in financing, so we might come at a later stage for supporting large projects, but we need also to rely on the work of NGOs, but also, microfinance institutions, local banks. So each one of us can really be part of the solution. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to bring in Princess Esmeralda. You're well familiar with the work of Earth for All, that really in a very compelling way, highlight the interconnectedness between poverty, gender equality, and our collective ability to actually tackle climate change. And I think to really understand the mutuality between those social and environmental elements, I think is a very compelling part of the business case for corporates. If I can come back to you, Princess Esmeralda, you're a climate activist. You've been engaged in climate justice, women's rights, indigenous communities. From your vantage point, have you seen a shift in how the corporate sector is engaging with this crisis?
Yeah, thank you. So we started this session with justice and with speed. And you're very right, we are not going to solve the climate crisis or the biodiversity crisis, which is as important, as crucial, without solving inequality. That is for sure. So it was very reassuring to hear all the words on just transition, which is absolutely vital. I just want to say that the world is changing. In probably 10 or 20 years, only the companies which will have done that shift will survive or will be judged correctly by the future generation. So it's absolutely vital to go on this line. I want also to say that I spend a lot of time in Asia, in Latin America, in Africa. The world is changing. It's not the same as last century. We are not the number one wise world as we thought we were. And Europe, I'm sorry to say, is not the main player. We have much bigger competitor, and whether it is in politics or in environment, I think we should step up. We have the Green European Deal, which could be really change-making, but it's not pushed enough. In politics, we are always shifting towards one bloc, where we should be in the middle and have our own policy. I'm sorry to say that, but I spend a lot of time in another part of the world, and it is changing. And unfortunately, the institution and the system is not changing fast enough. So I think the company should realize that and should work on that, what we said before, collaboration. It's not only philanthropy, it's collaboration, it's listening to people on the ground, what they want, and not imposing things. It's also working in the NGOs business. I mean, the big international NGOs are losing pace. Yeah. It's the local NGOs, the local communities that know exactly the way we should move. So that's what I wanted to say. Yes, I can see the shift. I can see lots of good words, but we have to go much faster and much more with solidarity, definitely.
Thank you for those words.
Thank you.
So before I close with some closing remarks, is there any comments or questions from the audience? Please. You might need to shout even more than our speakers.
Okay, thank you. I'm louder than them. Okay, so let me introduce myself. So this is Enamul Haq. I'm working in the field, ground, so working with the beneficiaries. So first of all, I'd like to thank all the panelists and the audience, and also I want to remind you about the video, the movie, what we have seen. So I think there are a lot of debates about justice, loss and damage, and we don't know actually what will happen next, even how long it will take to mitigate and manage everything. But we cannot wait for them. Even if you think about those girls who have already saved from this forced and early marriages and still can dream of a good life, even sometimes they are even seeing other women, even other girls are going to the universities from the church because of the impact our activities in the church. So I think if we interconnect all those things, I think when we see the globally, but we want to show you the heart of those girls, when they feel like I am one of them, who are privileged right now, this solar electricity or schooling or other thing. So the thing is, one important thing is also integration. like only the solar energy light, what will happen to their life, few benefits. But we still need to mobilize other partners to give the schools from other things. So I think like you are the top leaders, and you can also, there are some responses from us also. So what can we do, the who are working in the field, can mobilize other partners, even make the integration so that we can make the bigger change. When there is school, they can study longer time. So I think, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
First of all, very interesting debate. Thank you for. I'm back on the CSRD regulations, and I jump on the comment you made, Pascal, around 40,000 suppliers. So my question is, how do you embark them into that new reality? Because this is tier one, from what I understand, and then they have probably as many suppliers as you have. So I'm in traceability, scope 1, 2, 3, and we are meeting a lot of companies, and it's really, really a complex matter. That's why I'm interested to understand how you guys are, I wouldn't say attacking, because it's not, but how are you starting the journey with embarking them? Because we're talking about CSRD, secondary data, which is easy to do, because you have database to collect those. But when we are serious about the strategy to start reducing, we cannot do it with secondary data. And how do we now ensure that we invest in the right place, not to digitalize everything, because it wouldn't make sense, but at least how you, I would be interested in understanding your approach towards that big movement.
Thank you. Maybe without getting too technical, with 1 minute to spare.
Yeah, 1 minute, because it's a long debate. Actually, it's a journey. You put the right word. It's a journey. At Solvay, we have a double approach. The first one is ourselves. We let's say we inform our suppliers that the criteria for future procurement will incorporate climate components and are already incorporating human rights components. So it's part of it, right? So inform so that they have time to prepare. We help them to prepare, and then we will implement, according to what we request. The second level is industry level, because we cannot do everything alone. So industry has to set, let's say, the rules, the standards. We have in the chemical industry Together for Sustainability, which is an organization creating these standards. And we communicate that standard to all suppliers. And we are all suppliers and customers. There is a lot of exchange between the players, right? So it works, but it's a very long journey, and we are at the beginning, I would say.
Thank you, Claire. I see you nod.
Yes, nothing to add.
Nothing to add.
It's indeed a journey. I think we will do better and better with time. We're working. There are some things which indeed are for all of our suppliers. Human rights, for instance, are of course in the contractual clauses for all our suppliers. And there are some things we will be working on with suppliers in concentric circles. So starting with a few hundreds of most meaningful suppliers, and then enlarging. We're sure it's a step in the right direction, but we're sure it will take a bit of time.
Wonderful. Well, let me conclude with a few words. First of all, to thank you all for this delightful conversation, despite the noise level. I think it has met my hope and more for exploring what climate solidarity means in the corporate sector and how it can be made a reality. Pascal, you reminded us that how the CSRD is for a wider set of stakeholders than previous standards. And that gives hope for me that with the right engagement and capability, employees can be stakeholders for creating change. And I think that's exciting. You reminded Runa how employees are looking for a job with meaning, and if they don't find it, they will leave. And how the business operates and how they support the transition and adaptation across the global value chain. Claire, Runa, Milena, in your own ways, you pointed to how we need holistic solutions that are inclusive of a global south and a global north into one global. A transition that is not owned and is not owned, and for all people risk pushback, in fact, and risk pushing more people back into poverty. And what better way to do this than focusing on trust and building bridge, as you opened our session with, Princess Esmeralda. Transparency from reporting practices like the CSRD can help with trust, but ultimately it is people who can build trust, and that starts with solidarity and friendship. So with that, let me thank you, panelists, Claire, Pascal, Minella, Princess Esmeralda, and of course, delightful host, Runa Khan, for all Friendship Belgium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.